Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Art episode. We're episode 44 tonight with Jason Bailey. I'm super excited to have you on. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is exciting. I turn 43 soon, so it's like
Oh,
almost like it was meant to be.
nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I was on, what episode was it? I think episode like 41 or something. I was like, Bitcoin was also just hitting 41,000. So I was like, oh, are my episode numbers correlated with Bitcoin price? But totally kidding. But I was like, maybe that'd be a cool thing to track to see what Bitcoin prices were at each episode.
I
I
don't
should
think
have a
any of
little,
us would be sad if Bitcoin hit 44 today, so,
yeah, no, we wouldn't. I should have a little counter the market price in the corner on the episodes. That'd be pretty cool.
let's make it happen. We'll will it into existence.
Exactly. Everyone, when you pop in the chat, definitely say hello. Let us know you're here. Super excited for today's episode, and we'll give everyone a couple minutes just to come on in. Um, and as you come in, you know that you can ask any questions live as we go, and I will read them out loud, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Normally, we get through everything. I think there was maybe only a couple that once I missed, and I felt really bad afterwards. But we'll get through everything today. And also, um, I will do this month. We have a new sponsor. Last month was Avagache, which was awesome. A few of you messaged me about it, which was pretty cool that you were trying things out. So this month we have a new sponsor we'll talk about. But I still just want to wait a few minutes to let everyone get in here. Um, I guess while we're waiting, what was the coolest thing that happened this week for you, Jason?
Coolest thing that happened for me this week. Um, so I'm gonna say his name wrong, but Fred Airsam, the
Mm-hmm.
co-founder of Coinbase, followed me on Twitter. That was kind of
That
neat.
that is pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
He's an awesome guy.
And then last week was pretty neat. I got to give that presentation at MIT. So growing up in a family of engineers, and being the weird black sheep art kid, it's
Yeah,
like, like check it out, mom and dad, I made it.
that's
Like
so cool.
yeah, yeah. So it's been a good few weeks. I think we were saying before we went live, I was kind of hoping for 2021 to be really mellow and low key, and it's sort of been anything but, right? I mean, there's some good stuff happening that's exciting, and there's some weird stuff happening, but it's like it's definitely not like a mellow year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. But it's awesome to see. I have seen um, the space grow in such a crazy way in 2021, but I've also seen artists that have been here for a while be rewarded in some pretty special ways with the way that this market particularly is going. So it's definitely been an interesting 2021 so far. And I think like it's crazy to think that January is already over, but it's also like, wow, we still have an entire year ahead of us, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah, no, I agree.
we'll see. I'm sure it'll bring plenty of craziness. Awesome. So we have some people coming in here. So I want to start off like we did last time. So as you guys know, Behind the Art season 1 and 2, I did all of these questions at the end. Now I'm breaking it up. I'm doing 3 questions in the beginning, 3 questions in the end, or 4 questions in the end. They've gotten a little weirder. So excuse that, but I think it's kind of fun. I think we should get weirder every season. So we're just gonna jump right into it. And disclaimer: these have like nothing to do with crypto, um, generally, or NFTs or art or anything. But I think it's just kind of like a cool icebreaker. And the reason why I'm starting to ask them at the beginning is because I often realized when I was asking questions at the end, there were so many other things that I could have asked during the chat that were related to how they answered those questions. So I want to switch it up. Okay, so to start, if you could be on a reality TV show, which one would you choose and why?
Yeah. Um,
Oops.
I think I don't watch a lot of TV, but I think there's a show called Alone, and I think it's like they drop people off, like 12 people off in these random remote islands up in Vancouver. And my dad and my older brother are both like survivalists, like camp in the woods, kind of like
Very
super
cool.
able people. And I don't have any of those skills, but I have this theory that I could like out lazy all the competition. Like if I got dropped off, I would not like forage, hunt, do like anything, but I'm good at just kind of being alone in general. So I think I
Okay.
would just like get cozy and just like park myself somewhere and not win, but people watching the show would be like, "Holy smokes, that dude hasn't moved in 4 days and he's like still smiling," you know? And then I'd probably like be kicked off in the fifth day.
That's so funny. So do you get so you are secluded and you have to do your own hunting and build your own shelter and whoever lasts the longest wins something?
Yeah, yeah, and it's cool
Okay.
because like you'll see that they do like the ahead of time like the previews of like the backgrounds and all the people, and it's
Hmm.
like like a 250-pound muscly Marine who teaches like survival or whatever, and like halfway through day one he's like, I miss my family, and then like gets on the helicopter and leaves, and then
That's
they're
amazing.
like these super tough ladies that are like herbalists or whatever, and they go like 3 months or whatever, and they end up like they have to drag them off because like they don't want to leave, but like if you lose too much weight,
Yeah,
they
it's not
pull you
safe.
off. So I think the lesson is like seriously, it's like get as fat as you can before you go, because then your
Yeah.
body kind of eats its own calories or whatever, and
Yeah.
like so I'd show up like twice as fat as I already am, and like just like find
And
like a
just
cozy
hibernate.
spot and just hibernate. Like I totally would hibernate. Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, that's cool. Last episode I said I grew up clearly under a rock because I've never seen the show Survivor, and there's
Oh
like
yeah.
literally 40 seasons of it. So I've been binging Survivor. I don't think I'd do well on it, but I love watching it. So I figured I'd just like it'd be fun to try out. Like I think my social game would be probably a little bit better than my physical game, probably a lot better. But it is super interesting to just think of like what would you do in those situations. Like I think it's crazy when people are crying on the 25th day when they like get to see their loved one or their mom, and I'm like, I don't think I would cry about that, but maybe, like, who knows, like starvation and sleep deprivation does a lot to you. So it's cool to think about.
Yeah,
um
I think I would turn Survivor into Alone. Like they
yeah.
drop me off with all the people, and then they'd be like, "Where's Jason?" And I'd be like off in the bushes or something.
Oh my gosh, finding all the immunity idols. Um, if you were, I guess this one leads right into the second question. If you were on a deserted island with either your worst enemy or no one, which would you choose?
Oh, I mean, I think I have to go with no one. I mean, I don't know if I can break the rules and say like if I could have my dog, I'd be all set, right? So
Yeah.
Frida's my baby, so if I could have Frida there, I'd be good. I'm pretty good at like getting along with people, so I think my like even my worst enemy, like I would probably acquiesce and kind of cave into whatever it is that they were upset about, and I'd be like, yeah, you're right, whatever. But I also kind of think I'd be like, annoyed by that person pretty quickly. So like I'd go it alone and like with a preference for my dog if
All right,
possible. An
that's
enemy.
fair. Okay, and third question for now. What is your favorite piece of art that you own?
Ooh, favorite piece of art that I own. So that rotates kind of regularly. Like different days, different artworks that I like, which is why I think I spend all my money collecting art. But I've got the physical version of Robbie Barrett's Nude Number One that he gave me when I was in Zurich as a gift from him and the gallery. And that's pretty cool. I still get
Wow.
excited when I get to look at that. So I'd say that. And I've got in my living room the Manolo prints, so the South American generative artist. I've got these big, bright, hey, kitty, big,
She's
bright
crying,
Manolo
sorry.
prints. And then Jared Tarbell prints as well that I've loved for like I've just loved those images that he created for like 20 years or whatever, and I finally got physical versions that are printed and in my living room. So for me, like the bar for digital art's a bit lower because I don't have
Mhm.
to look at it every day. But
Yeah.
if you're in my living room, you're in my shrine,
That's a
right?
big deal. Totally.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it is such, I like that you bring that up. I want to talk about that too during our discussion. Sorry, guys, my cat is being crazy. She's like jumping across the screen. Um, I think it's so interesting the difference between the connection with digital and physical art. And it is so it's interesting to hear you say that because I don't know if a lot of people really either think about it or if they um, maybe just have a different opinion than I do. But I have such a different relationship that I do with pieces that I collect digitally and pieces I collect physically. And people can argue digital can have as big of an impact in your personal space through digital frames, but even still, it's so different to me. You can just change that out every day. Like hanging something on your wall in a frame, like old school art style, is like a big commitment, and it's showing a piece of you, a piece of your collection, like a story. Like it just shows so much, and it's there for literally everyone to see that's going into that space. So I do think it's such a different experience for me. I guess for you, do you want to? I know kind of a weird question to start off with, but do you want to talk about that a little bit and how? Because you, I mean, we're gonna get into your history and everything, but like you know so much about digital and generative art, and you've like known about it for so long and been a leader in that space. What was that, I guess, transition when you, I'm assuming, were initially collecting physical works and started collecting something like digital and generative works? And what is the different feeling when you collect both?
Yeah, yeah. So my initial background was in analog, what I would call analog or physical art. I mean, that's what I went to school for in undergrad, and we can talk about that later. So very comfortable with the idea and value behind physical art and collecting it. And the biggest thing I miss in 2020 is being able to go into museums, which is like my therapy, and be near physical artworks. But I'm obviously a huge cheerleader for the value of digital art and keeping digital art digital. So what you know, I've learned that a lot of things that I have assumptions about the direction that the world will go with digital art aren't necessarily the case because I'm kind of a weirdo. So for me, I actually don't want my digital art in digital frames. Like I don't want to
Mm,
go buy digital frames and hang them around my house for my digital art. I'm already in front of a screen all day, right? And
mm-hmm.
I've got my screen in my phone and my screen in my laptop, and then maybe an hour of television, which is a screen. So for me, those things are just fine for the majority of like the NFTs that I have, and the ability to kind of cruise through those things whenever I want. And I go back and look at the earliest stuff that I bought, and I'd also say I'm weird in that it's sort of a uh, art is less of a social thing for me in terms of art appreciation. There's just like this connection that I have with works that the magic happens every time I look at them. I like that digitally. There's less of a cap on what I can collect.
Mm-hmm.
So I've probably got 100 NFTs and maybe 25 artworks or whatever. But I mean, I live in a smallish house in the burbs, and
Yeah.
like I'm probably at my cap for how many physical artworks I can buy. Whereas I can buy digital stuff, no problem. And I also feel like things has a lot to do with the artist's intentions. But if the artist created something digitally and intended it to be viewed digitally, I don't feel any need to make it look or feel like it's somehow physical. I mean,
Yeah.
the old school digital generative artists, they were doing stuff on plotters, big plotters, because
Mm.
they didn't really have great screen technology or any really for a while to show their work. And a lot of times when it was printed out, that would be the first time that even they would see it. Um,
Wow.
so for like the old school stuff, I think printed makes sense. But for the new school stuff, I dig it just on the screen. And I actually don't, unpopular opinion, but I don't want it to in like some 3D, metaverse. Like I find all those other things kind of distracting as like an art nerd purist. I don't want, those, I don't need a virtual recreation of a 3D gallery or whatever. It doesn't add anything. It kind of takes away from the piece for me.
Interesting. I like that perspective, and I like just hearing something different because you hear a lot of people talk about, okay, well, what's the use? Like, how can I actually use these NFTs? Like, what's the point? Like, all these things. And a lot of people say you display them in your virtual homes and stores, and you have this virtual identity through your art collection, or you have some sort of, in some way, like, status through what's held in your wallet because it is public and people can see it. So it is interesting to hear how other people, what they expect for their art and what their, I guess, even the collector's intentions with the art as well, because that can often be, like you said, different from the artist's intentions. So that's an interesting thing you just said.
Yeah, I think and this could be like a snobby and way off thing, but I think part of it is the artists that I see, like you or me, there's people that have a deeper background in making art, I think tend to rely less on the public value of it because like you're just into it in a really deep way, right? So you're looking at it and you're thinking about every step that was made in producing that work because you make work yourself, right?
Hmm.
And that offers sort of infinite engagement on a one-to-one person to art level, right? Like it's cool when I can share the work that I have with other people, but it's not really necessary. And like, I don't know. I mean, this for someone that writes a lot about art, I don't always like to like have to sit there and talk about like in person, like if someone comes into my house, like, and this work is this, and that work,
Yeah,
it's just like it's there for me.
yeah. That's really interesting. And no, I totally agree with you there. I mean, my art in your home is such a personal experience, and every single piece that we have hanging is there because we connected with it, either the piece directly or the where we were in the world and we saw it. I even have a piece in particular that I'm thinking of hanging up that I actually, as bad as it sounds, don't love the piece at all, but it has such a cool memory that
Yeah.
it has to be up. And it's really cool to look back at it and remind. I was gifted the piece from actually like a gallery owner from an artist that he had collected for a while, and he gifted me this piece, which was so generous and awesome. And he had a connection with it, which makes me like it, even though I don't like it. So there is so many weird things, and it's like, yeah, I don't really want to explain to you that actually I don't like that piece on my wall at all right now. But it's cool. It's cool to hear and see. Okay, I guess backing up a little bit, we'll reverse, and I would love to sort of start at the starting point. You come from a family of engineers, and seems like more of a, well, just a totally different, path than what you've taken. Do you want to talk a little bit about um, growing up and finding your passion for creativity and art and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I always start by saying that I come from a family of engineers, and I think people are like, well, why does that matter? But I think it shapes a lot of who I am. So not only a family of engineers, but I was raised Mormon, and there are a lot of if you have Mormon friends or if you are Mormon, nothing against Mormon people. Most of my relatives are. There are a lot of things you can't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had this geeky engineering family who valued, really engineering, mathy, sciencey things, and then I wasn't allowed to like watch a lot of the popular movies and listen to the music that a lot of the people at my school my age would listen to. So I was just kind of like set up for social failure in some
Yeah.
ways, right? And then even within the household, I was the worst in the family at math, science, engineering, the things that were sort of the social currency in the house. My family are awesome and they're super supportive, but like all the conversations like immediately went deep into tech from like a young age. That was like what my household was about. So I think maybe like a psychologist would say that like I rather realizing at a young age that I couldn't compete, right? I
Mm.
found a thing that I could do, and religion was so full of rules, and engineering and math are so full of rules that I gravitated towards something that rewards you for making your own rules, right? And not
Yeah.
I wasn't good at memorizing and following known paths. Still arguably am not, but I'm excellent at doing things the wrong way and then justifying it, which turns out is good for art.
Yeah.
So I think early on that became part of my identity, and not a great student in school, but spent all my time in the art room and had my first one kid show when I was like 16 or 15 in the town
So
hall
cool.
basement with like a bunch of paintings, because that's all I did was like paint, make collage and draw and stuff like that. And because of my portfolio, I got into undergrad. A lot of people didn't think that I would get into college because my grades were bad and I was sort of a discipline problem. But I was like the kind of kid that would skip school and go in the woods and like read art history and smoke cigarettes or whatever, right? So like pretty nerdy stuff. I knew what I wanted to do. There just wasn't really a venue to do that all that well where I grew up. So once I got into art school and found my people, my life just took a different course, and it's been a lot better since then.
That's such a cool story. I connect with some of that. Being raised in a super, not Mormon, but a, and I don't mean to connect this to Mormonism at all, but in my situation, a closed minded, and not, it didn't nurture any of my creativity, that's for sure, situation and religion. And when I was in school, I would also skip school and go to my pottery teacher's room and just create pottery literally like wheel throw all day. And
Right.
she allowed us to, it was me and another girl that I became best friends with, but she allowed us to because she knew we could be skipping school and doing something else. So she was happy we were at least there and being creative, and she was totally fine with it. And my senior year of high school, because an Illinois requirement, there's a like legal requirement of how many gym classes you have to take before you graduate. So my senior year, because I had skipped so much school, I had to take 3 gym classes in a row for the
Oh, that
entire
sounds like
year.
hell.
I
That
was
sounds
like,
like hell.
oh, this is my worst. And I was not one of those kids who liked gym class. Like, I was like, this is my worst nightmare. I can't swim. I had to take swimming. Like, I was like, this is terrible. But I'm totally with you on that. I connect with that on a lot of different levels. So when you got into school and found your art people and people that you connected with and maybe were more similar to you than anyone else that you had grown up with, what was that change for you? Did you feel like relieved to know there were other people like you? Did it heighten, like, just like enhance like all the other things you wanted to do?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I changed that much. I think what happened is my environment changed. So I would challenge my teachers in high school and, on things conceptually, even though I wasn't a good student, I was fairly inquisitive, right? And that doesn't go over well in high school, right? You get disciplined if you're challenging the
Yeah.
teacher or doing strange things or coming up with unique projects or whatever. And that same behavior went from almost getting me kicked out of high school to getting me like almost a full scholarship in my freshman year after barely getting into college, because
Yeah.
professors love to be challenged, right? And they love creativity and they love people that are like thinking outside the box. So, um, you know, I went from like first day of college undergrad thinking like, oh my God, I'm just like super lucky that I even got in because no one thought I could. And I need to turn it around. And I mean, I definitely partied, right? Because I'm first time away from home, but I was the kid who partied and then stayed up all night and did my projects. And by the end of the semester, I had great grades and got the scholarship, and it was just, I was being rewarded for I kind of like the animal that I was, right? I was an
Mm-hmm.
art animal, and I was living in the wrong zoo in high school, and I found the right zoo and didn't really have to change my behavior much to be recognized for the skills that I had, I think, at the time, or at least the interests that I had at the time.
Yeah. And what was the that's awesome to hear, and I love that. I feel like those types of stories can either go a good way or a bad way, and it's awesome that you were able to find a place where you were allowed to be yourself, because that's not always how it is, and it's so great to hear that when people are able to find that, and it makes your life more fulfilling and happier too. What you were saying that when you were 16, you had this show with all of these paintings and everything like that. How did your art progress over time and in school, and when you started adding different things to your art and different processes?
Yeah, I think I took sort of a traditional art kid route where I tried to go through art history and recreate the different people that I thought were great, right? So, actually, a quick side story that might be funny that relates to this. So, I grew up early 90s, it was like middle school for me and high school or whatever. So, there wasn't really much going on internet wise. And I had like such a passion for art that I would go to the library and get art books, and I was cutting out the works that I really liked out of the books and then returning the books, and like I would hide the images that I cut out from the books in between like the mattress in my bed. So
Oh
like my,
my
my,
gosh.
my parents were like checking my room, probably expecting to find something else that a teenage boy might have. And there's like these MC Escher and Salvador Dali images in between the mattress, and they're like, what the heck is wrong with this kid? So they made me like pay my allowance money to save up and like replace the books at the library or whatever. So so how this relates is I kind of like a lot of kids. Someone introduced me to like MC Escher or Salvador Dali or Picasso, like the really obvious, sort of popular Van Gogh. And I think I just painted and drew my way through wanting to be like them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you know art history, they did the same, a lot of them, right? So you start with certain masters and you work your way through. And I think by the time I was sort of like a junior or senior in high school, I craved having my own style, right? Because that's like what the big, artists do. Like, okay, now Now I'm all grown up at like 17 or whatever, right? I have to have my own style. So I moved again, like I think a lot of artists, from representational work, where I did a lot of traditional drawing and representational art, to these sort of abstract biomorphic, images. And my thing, which I mean, it was fairly mature for artist statement for like a kid that age, was like, there's so much that we express through sort of body language and nonverbal communication. And what happens when we stretch or hide, that those signals that we get from the human figure? And is there a point where you can amplify those signals or mute those signals by exaggerating, and pull them completely away from being recognizable as humans, right? So I carried that kind of into college, and then got obsessed with this area where there's like this line for me where something goes from being super attractive and appealing to super repulsive. And how do you like cross and equivocate back and
Mm.
forth on that line, where it's like, an example that I think of that's sort of silly and obvious is like moldy food or whatever, like, a
Hmm.
delicious but moldy meal. And then you kind of can also think like, but the mold is kind of beautiful too, right? So these were more abstract, but like, how do you play with this attraction repulsion thing, was part of what I went through. And I also wanted to be like your art teacher. My art teacher was a big part of my early life. And I wanted to be a teacher. So I took a lot of different classes. I took painting and sculpture and printmaking, and, it was welding and, all kinds of different stuff. And ultimately decided that maybe a longer story, that, teaching probably wasn't for me. But yeah, so I think I went from thinking, I want to be a famous artist, and like I have this serious biomorphic, human repulsion thing, to like, no one really ever makes it. I should just learn how to do a bunch of stuff so I can teach other people like the basics of these things.
Wow. What an interesting path. And I feel like it's also, I mean, for me looking into that and thinking a little bit about my own journey as well, I bet when you're thinking about being a teacher and just learning all these different things, it's because the first time that you're being around people that are successful working in art is going to school and studying art. So you're seeing these people, okay, well they made it. They're artists and they teach. So that's like what you learn and how you think that someone could be successful and still be an artist. You don't I mean, for me, like when you don't grow up around other artists, you don't realize that there could be so much more to that, and so many more fulfilling things, which of course teaching is super fulfilling if that's what you're passionate about, but so many fulfilling things that you can do with just creating, not necessarily becoming famous or selling works for crazy amounts, like just um, the action of creating and expressing like is fulfilling within itself in a lot of ways. Um, that's a really cool journey. And when you, I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about after college? What did your life look like? What did you go on to do when you graduated? And I guess leading in a little bit to how you began to start Artnome and everything you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. So I was very aware, all the adults around me were kind of like, what are you going to do when you graduate? What are you going to do when you graduate? What are you going to do when you graduate? Because everyone was kind of afraid, like, getting an art major, and like, what is that going to translate into? And I was aware of it, but I also was like, my life isn't going to get better than this. I get to paint and sculpt and do all these things 24/7, and I'm going to let myself do this, and I'll figure it out when I'm out. So it was funny. I mean, I just made stuff up because I was like scared of life, like everyone who graduates. And I was like, maybe I'll be like a sculptor at Legoland. Like I just picked like random things because I'm like, I don't know what I'm qualified for, and someone
Mm-hmm.
has to be making those sculptures at Legoland, right?
So cool.
Um, right. So we went cross country. I Another friend of mine was going to school out west, and we ended up going cross country. And part of in my head was like, I don't know, maybe I'll actually check out Legoland, but that didn't happen. And I flew back home after kind of traveling around the country on the cheap. And I started my job search on 9/11, the 9/11, like
Oh
the
wow.
Twin Towers 9/11. And for folks that were alive, when that happened, that was not a good time to start a job search. Like,
Yeah,
no
no.
hiring and things were kind of shut down. And I lucked out in that, my dad had a lot of connections in the tech business, and a guy that I think ultimately wanted to hire both my brothers and my dad, and thought maybe if he brought me in as the least desirable Bailey, that he could get some of the other ones over there. Hired me to be a technical reporter, which is hilarious because I was like neither technical nor a reporter.
Yeah.
um, but I was just like, I'll take it, like any work, right? Because when
Right.
you're fresh out of school, art degree. So I taught myself like Photoshop and what's the Adobe video, Premiere was big at the
Mm-hmm.
time, Adobe Premiere, and a bunch of like other stuff. And I had those design and art skills that I could translate there. And a skill that I didn't realize I had that I've used my entire life now to sort of build my career around, because I spent my entire, first 18 years around nonstop technical talk. I had soaked up the ability to listen to really technical people and ask questions without feeling dumb, and then
Mm.
break it down and make it easy for other people that are less technical to understand. And I
Yeah.
basically built my entire career around that. So, early on when I was the technical reporter, people would talk at a really high level, geek out about what they were working on, and I could break that down without losing the nuance in a way that less technical people could understand. So that job was like a year, and then I did 5 years at an accident reconstruction company. And there's sort of this long history of me pretending like I have skills I don't have when I go in to get a new job. So they're like, can you do 3D animation? And I was thinking, I don't know, I taught myself Photoshop and like, Premiere. Yeah,
Sure.
I can do 3D. They're like, we've got Maya. Like, can you do Maya? And I'm like, yeah, I can do Maya. Well, that was a huge mistake, because it turns out like learning Maya is more like learning a language or the piano. It's not like
Right.
in like a night, right? So took classes at RISD for 2 years, like learned Maya, did a bunch of crazy exploding buildings and like accidents and product failure animations. And then I took a pivot. After that, I went into software, another technical field, technical software. And these guys, I was like a designer, and these guys would come down the hall in suits and be like, change that to purple, or this doesn't work, or whatever. And it was like always bad ideas, like, but it was clear to me that they were making like way more money than I was. And I was finally like, like, who are these guys that like have no skills, make more money than I do, and get to veto like my design
Right.
opinions? And they're like, oh, that's marketing. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I swapped over to marketing, and have done marketing probably for the last 15 years, tech marketing. And again, it's this helping really technical folks explain their business models and their software in a way that anyone can understand without kind of without dumbing it down. And then I guess real quick, just to get the rest of the history out, I missed art people. Like those are my people, right? I mean, that's the story of my life. So I went back 2007, and I got an MFA at Mass College of Art and Design, and that was really much more focused on digital, right? So by then I had taught myself, Maya and Premiere and Adobe, and but wasn't aware, like a lot of people, that there's this super rich history of digital art. It's not like, I think people every year treat digital art like it's this weird mutant that just crawled out of the
Mm.
closet. But there's like a crazy rich art history around digital art, that I was just lucky enough to spend a few years in grad school going really deep and understanding that, and having that sort of impact the way I do my own creation. And then since then, mostly startups in the Boston area. Couple got acquired where I went to companies as big as Autodesk and HP. 2 years ago, decided I was going to try to start this Artnome thing. So I quit a really good job in Cambridge at a machine learning company that was sort of like up and coming, and started I thought I'll give myself 4 or 5 months to try to turn Artnome into a real business, and I'll explain sort of what that business would have looked like real quick. Um, but I assumed, because I've come from startups, that I would have failed, right? So I was just kind of banking on 4 or 5 months and then failure. But I took on consulting, and it's lasted now 2 years. So I don't. I can pause for a second, or do you want me to kind of go quickly into the background of what
Yeah,
Artnome was?
I would love for you to go into that.
Yeah. So I tend to just give me the hook if I talk too long.
No,
So
that's what the point of this is, and I love all the tangents. That's the point. So keep going.
yeah. So I had this great startup job, and but a lousy commute, and which meant I listened to a lot of books on not books on tape. That's super old school. But like podcasts or whatever, and like audiobooks. That's the word I'm looking for. And there was this one about forgery, these two forgers in England, and like how like prevalent forgery is. And like the thing that really got me was that people were forging the provenance, which is the
Mm.
documentation, right, behind the works.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you all know my backstory, right, like this is my religion, like, and I say that and people are like, hyperbole, but like, no, literally this is my religion. And now I'm learning at like, my mid to late 30s that like, half of it could be a lie. Like 15 to 20% of these works could be misattributed, or completely forged. And working in tech, I was like, well, where the hell's the database? There has to be a database that just lists out. I mean, the art market, $65 billion a year. Most of that 65 billion comes from like 100 or fewer artists, right? That sell for like tens of millions to hundreds of millions, right? So how hard is it to look and build a database with the complete works of 100 artists so that you can kind of help fight forgery, right? So I did this thing where I kind of checked with all these libraries, Harvard, the Getty Institute, and I'm like, hey, where's the database like of the complete works of all these artists? And they were all, every single one came back and was like, it's a huge gap in scholarship. It doesn't really exist. It's a real problem. If you find one, let us know.
Wow.
So I just kind of stayed bummed out about it for a while, and then my family, my wife and my family were like try to solve it. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, no one dude could make any dent in this. And it turns out there are these catalog raisonnés, which are the complete works of the artist, but they're in printed books and they're super rare, not super rare, but super
Right.
rare. And they can cost the Picasso catalog raisonné was like $200,000 until recently. So like they're not something you can just like go to your library and get. So I
Right.
spent 3 years and all my extra money and all my extra time like trying to hunt these books down, like these libraries around the country and collectors, and scanning the metadata, so that I could kind of prove out to the world that like, hey, it's irresponsible. This is our cultural heritage, right? And people are rewriting it. And we've got all these signs that we all care about art. All these every college has classes where you can learn about it. Every museum has armored guards to protect it, and no one's even done a decent job of counting it, right? So then 3 years after 3 years of doing that and like getting embarrassed talking about it at parties because like it's super nerdy. Like that's a crazy nerdy thing to do. Like you're at a party with your friends and they're like, what are you up to? I'm like, oh, I like flip page by page and like take photos of metadata from catalog raisonnés every night and weekend. And but I was like, no one's gonna know about this if I don't write about it. So I started artnome.com to share about like the new analytics that could be derived from this and like why it's important and like where we could go with it. And it focused mainly on that for a few months. And then I remembered, I would go to these like Christie's or Sotheby's events. So I lucked out. A few big 538 and a few big other outlets wrote about my blog early on, and my traffic went from like tens of people to 10,000 a month or whatever. And I started getting invitations to speak at art events.
Wow.
And yeah, I realized that that at these art events that people weren't really into like digital and tech art, right? And I was like, what's this bias against digital and tech art? Like this is like the most important, cool, great work that's being done. And I realized I had this platform in Artnome. So, and I also, I guess the other thing I realized is I missed writing, like in grad school, I missed writing about this stuff. So I let myself go away from the database and write about early work being done with AI and art history and AI art and blockchain and art. And, my timing, I just accidentally and stupidly backed in on all those things at the exact right time. So
Wow.
I wrote that first blockchain and art article after half a day's research. The next day, it went to the top of SEO on Google. I got invitations to fly to London and present at Christie's, and like people say, and I didn't know that much, right? So this is 2017. So that's when I decided I had to go meet the actual people in this space, right? The OGs, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I have to learn if I'm going to get these invitations. I have to like be able to say something. So I went to Rare AF, which is kind of like famous, right,
Yep.
in space. I think it's famous for good reason because that's when it went from like a handful of projects that people were doing on their own to like a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Looney, who created Rare Pepe and basically invented the idea of art on the blockchain, was there and gave a mind-blowing presentation. It's still ahead of what most of these platforms are doing. It's online. People should go to YouTube, check it out. Bea and Judy from Dada were there and like leading the charge on how we don't want to just recreate the traditional art world. We really need to use blockchain to do something different and unique, or else we've kind of lost this opportunity. Matt and John from CryptoPunks, like two of the nicest, most sincere, genuine guys, were there and talking about CryptoPunks while it was still new. A bunch of other, I mean, I could go on, a bunch of other folks that kind of were just really nice to me and like excited to share about like, the space. So I started writing about them and did a podcast. And yeah, I mean, I'll pause there, but like, I think that brings everything, whole life story up to Rare AF.
That's so epic. I love that you, like you said, I mean, your story is crazy, and things aligned in such a really cool way that you were able to discover, art and blockchain. And for you, which I feel like a lot of people, including myself, sometimes has problems with this, you just jumped on it. You didn't take a second to think about it, and you wrote a piece on it, you published it, and then you were like, okay, shit, I need to learn more. Let me learn more and dive in, which is really cool because a lot of people psych themselves out and they're like, it's not good enough. What if people, what if this, what if that? And there's always something that stops people from like pushing themselves to do something like that. And for you to have that, whatever it is, like, I don't know, bit of crazy, bit of like being spontaneous, whatever it is such a cool drive to have. And it's such a unique space where you were immediately getting rewarded for it by people inviting you to London to come speak, whatever, all these things. And the really cool thing of all of this is that you were the right guy for this. It wasn't someone who was, in my opinion, because it wasn't someone who was trying to ride a bandwagon and just like follow along and then dip out if it wasn't cool enough. Like for you, this is your life's mission, like you said, your religion. So it's really beautiful, and this story is so cool that it happened to be in your hands to spread this knowledge and write more about it and bring it to other people. And it's um, such a unique story and path that I just think is so cool. And I think there is also something so special about, like before when we're talking about digital art versus physical art in your home, it is something that's so unique, similar to, and I think about this all the time, especially because of the pandemic, meeting people in person versus meeting people online. And that
Mm-hmm.
you were able to go there and talk with these people, hear the talks in person, and also share with other people later when you're doing your own talks is such a different experience than watching something on YouTube or coming into a Zoom call or whatever it is. So I think it's really just such a awesome path and so unique to you because there's not a ton of people that happened for, and you built that path yourself, which is just so awesome to hear. So when you were first hearing about um, all of these people that you just said you met, Matt, John, all these people, when you were first meeting them and like hearing about their companies and like what was going on and what everyone was building in art and blockchain, this intersection, like what was the feeling for you?
Yeah, so it's an important distinction, that there weren't companies. So it felt like, I think if I came in now, even though the companies in this space are awesome, and I know a lot of the people that are started them, but the fact that it was super experimental, I mean that's where I'm happiest, right? When things get normal, I leave, right?
Right.
So when I'm kind of a contrarian, I'm not really comfortable when the dust settles and everyone knows how it's going to work moving forward. Not that interesting to me. When things are bizarre and hard to figure out and like kind of dicey and questionable, that's where I'm comfortable, right? So if there were any reason why I might be the right person for this, it's because early on when it was time to collect and there was like zero sign that any of this made any sense, that's exactly where I want to be, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
things are bizarre and there's an opportunity to lead by example and collect these works, I remember the first work I bought was by Mohara off of Dada. I'm not sure I even got a token, but it was only like $10, and he immediately like tweeted me back, and we started talking about like mezcal or whatever, and I was like, whoa, this is gonna work. Like,
Yeah.
who even cares about the artwork that I got? I just wanted to like say like thank you for making art, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna buy this and then sell it for more later or whatever. It was just like, wouldn't it be great if there was this way to knock down the barriers between collectors or art appreciators and artists, and to be able to like without a whole lot of friction send money back and forth? That's almost more, when the dollar sums were smaller, it was almost like tipping, back then,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's my personality type that, and it's still largely this way. I can't really afford to collect like I used to, but I bought everything I bought for the first year and a half with the assumption that there would never be a secondary market, and that it was like I just felt lucky to be able to, each time I bought something, I was brought closer to someone who was really creative,
Mm-hmm.
which was awesome. And then I would say on the path or whatever, that there's not definitely nothing special, about me at all. And I think you'll be able to actually kind of agree with this, that when you started, your podcast, if that's, I think, what we call this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the beginning, at least for me, when I started with like writing about stuff, I mean, I say I got some pickup from other outside places, but you do a good 5 6 months usually of any of these things with like crickets, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that that's the thing that holds people back. Um, so I left this part out, but I had done this basketball analytics thing that took off in like Nike and NBA.com and all the like. I kind of had my 15 minutes of fame earlier before Artnome, and why that matters. It's not like a braggy thing. It's because I learned this pattern that if you put your head down and do like genuinely self-rewarding, deep and thoughtful work, other people it's gonna resonate with other people, but it may take a wicked long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's so long that most people jump ship. If you're in it for the fame or the recognition, most people are like, and you can't blame them. 4 or 5 months in, no one gives a shit about what you're doing and you're working wicked hard. But you have to love that thing so much that you just keep working. And then, it breaks. It just breaks open. And once the dam breaks and people are interested, opportunities flow. And I just sincerely believe, I don't want anyone to think there's anything unique about me. I mean, I literally failed my way through like high school and got like, only through nepotism got my first job, and like struggled, struggled and lied about my skills so that I could get other jobs, and then stayed up all night trying to figure them out. Like, I'm super average person. I've just been persistent. And I think anyone, that I don't want the message to be like, if you win the lottery, this could happen for you too. I
Right.
think people can work their way into getting the recognition that they want.
That's really interesting. You said a lot of stuff, and there's something in particular I want to unpack a little bit. You said, well, I guess there's a lot of things. I should be writing these down so I don't forget. But you said something interesting about wanting to be in the places where things are different and weird and not accepted. And I wonder what you think about what has recently been happening in the NFT space. I mean, things have been very different for starting maybe 6 8 months ago, or maybe even sooner. So I guess without saying too much of my thoughts, I'd love to hear what you think. And do you think dust is settling in this area right now?
Yeah, we saw a little bit of this in early 2018. I mean, for better or for worse, the crypto art space seems to popularity wise seems to go with the currency prices like Bitcoin and Ethereum prices. But if you actually are in the space, I think some of the most creative work, in fact, I'm sure most of the creative work has been done in the valleys when ETH and Bitcoin are low, and the only reason to be doing this is because you love it. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of cool stuff, including original Rare Pepe and the CryptoPunks, and a lot of that stuff was sort of bear market or whatever. And this time last year, I thought this whole thing might die, and I have some sort of pride in trying to keep it going and growing, right? And I thought, well, we need to. The traditional art world used to tell me there's no secondary market; it's not going to survive. So in the beginning of this year, when I started parting with works for like $10,000 or whatever, like part of that was me trying to prove that there could be a secondary market, because I thought in the beginning we had platforms but no artists, and I tried to help bring artists to the platforms. And then we had artists but no collectors.
Mm.
So then we brought some collectors in, and then we had collectors but no secondary market. So then, I tried to help with the secondary market. But then I often look and I'm like, did I just like pour gas on the fire that I don't necessarily want? Like, it's a me problem, not a rest of the world problem. Even when I work at startups, if they start to get too much success, which is what most people would want in a startup, I jump ship, because that's not, we all have different spots where we do well. And I think the more popular this gets and the larger it gets and the faster it grows, the less comfortable I am. But there's still weird pockets, I think, plenty of weird pockets to find.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there about the weird pockets. I think it's interesting. It is so interesting to see just what's going on right now. And yeah, often wonder. I always remind people to collect art purely because they actually love the piece and are not speculating on it. Because in some cases, if you're not doing your due diligence on the artist, or something changed for them and the market drops or whatnot, you don't know if the artist is going to be around in this particular space for a long time. So I try to tell people to just purely buy what they love and not necessarily think about the secondary market. But I guess again, I'm not a trader, so I have a different mindset for it. Um, but especially seeing many, many artists flood in right now. And obviously, we've been in a bull run. So it's interesting to it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out when we're not in the bull run and when we were quiet for 3 years and a lot of us are still just creating because it's our passion, and for me because spreading awareness and education about Bitcoin and Ethereum was important to me, you know? So it's interesting to see what the space is growing into. There are definitely positives and negatives about it, in my opinion, but I'm interested to see um, who will stick around and how many things can actually be changed within this time where it's not just um, a wave or like that passes through, and it's actually like core structural things that are changed about art and the way we collect and the way people perceive it that can follow and continue when we are in the next bear market. But it's definitely interesting to think about. We had a couple comments and questions come up. Um, Adam Evans, mad respect for gathering and structuring all of the archival art data. Amazing story. You're the megaphone for this movement and a pillar in the space. Agreed. Um, Adam Evans also asked, what sort of analytics are you looking at now? Do you think it's possible to sorry, I can't speak, algorithmically assess the fair value of a work?
Yeah, one second. I'm just gonna close this. So yeah, I do. I wrote a paper. I hate plugging all my stuff or whatever, but the Harvard Data Analytics review commissioned me to write a paper that I got to spend like 3 months researching whether or not AI and ML can do valuation at a level comparable to human valuators. And after looking at all the kind of Sotheby's and Christie's and what they're doing and all the academic research, the conclusion that I came to is, at least right now, human valuators, like people that actually do human appraisers, are more accurate, but there's only so many of them and they can only do so many appraisals, right? So if you want to do something at scale, I often compare it to like Zillow, which prices every house like every day or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that machine learning and AI is going to be able to do that humans can't do, right? And for folks that are curious, like, well, why couldn't machine learning? Is it because it's too early or something like that? A big part of it, as far as I'm concerned, is that condition, as anyone could, I think, understand right away, condition of an artwork matters a ton. If the thing's
Yeah.
like shredded, unless it's a Banksy, if it's
Yeah.
shredded, it's not worth much, and if it's not shredded, it's worth a lot. But there's not great data. There's not a great database that you can tap into to automate things like condition into pricing. And whereas a human authenticator or evaluator is going to go in, and appraiser, that's the word I'm looking for, is going to go in and be able to assess things like condition, which will give them a higher level of accuracy. But it's a topic I'm super fascinated in. I've been working with a data scientist, Kyle Waters, who's sort of like the Artnome data scientist, on building a prediction model for the last 2-3 years, and we've got some interest from some angel investors and folks like that. So maybe we might be able to build something out.
That's super interesting. And you, just a side question of that, Artnome, is it a public database? Is it a private database? Do you guys have clients that have access to the database to see everything you guys have collected? Or how does that work?
Yeah, my goal has always been to make it public, but because I scanned books to get the metadata, and the art world is loaded with really wealthy people who can be litigious sometimes, I've had to be really, really careful. I've sort of been on what I call like a charm offensive for the last 3 years, where I go around and speak at these events so that people can see I'm not just trying to make a bunch of money or like compete with catalog raisonnés.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to give us the data-based backbone that we need to prevent the forgery and to increase transparency and get rid of some of the opacity, right? But if people don't know that, they're like, well, didn't this kid just scan a bunch of copyrighted books or whatever?
Mm.
So I hope to someday make it all public. And that's really my passion and the legacy that I want to leave. I'm getting older and I had my midlife crisis. Some people have their midlife crisis and get like a new wife or a Ferrari or something, or a convertible. I went and scanned data for 3 years because I'm like, art has given me so much in life, right? From like got me into college, got me my jobs, introduce me to my friends. So I want, if I'm going to leave a mark, in my lifetime, I'd love it to be that I kind of helped usher in a more data and analytic approach to help sort out and make sense of some of this art historical stuff.
Yeah, wow. Um, Another question came in. It's a little bit of a long one, so let's see. Anthony Citrano asked, um, Jason, I only just today learned what you are doing with Artnome. Very cool. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on connecting real world items to the blockchain in ways that verify provenance, authenticity, and so on. For example, you can't exactly put an RFID sticker on a Van Gogh canvas, and certificates of authenticity are physically separated from actual artwork. What do you think the future might hold in this regard?
Yeah, I tend to separate them for convenience between the use case for digital art and the use case for physical art. But there are cool people doing interesting things in the middle. But let me lay it out the way I usually do. So for physical art, I think about companies like Artery by Nana Decking, who's very well respected in the traditional art world, who's built a large database where the works are being stored on chain. And even when I lobby for transparency, I have to acknowledge that collectors that own these super expensive artworks, they want opacity. Well, I'm not going to say opacity because it puts it in the wrong light. They want privacy, and I don't
Yeah,
blame them. Right? They don't want everyone to know what they own, right? And I don't see that as a problem, and I respect that, right? So I think Artery's trying to use the blockchain to expose provenance in terms of like the credibility and legitimacy of the works, but not necessarily expose the collectors.
right.
Um, when we were in sort of the last heyday of blockchain art, when there was like an ICO every minute coming out around art and like tech, and none of them knew what they were doing, there were a lot of people like slapping stickers on the back of paintings and being like, hey, like this works for supply chain, like why couldn't it work here? And that's cool if people want to do it. Like I'm a digital art purist, so really the use case that I'm most excited about is that we can, buy, sell, trade, destroy, create, digital art now and build a market around it like we never could before. So a lot of times there'll be, I'm going to throw a pet peeve out there. A lot of times there'll be like physical artists like that do like paintings on canvas or this, that, and the other. And they're like, whoa, money's flowing. How do I get involved with this money? And they're like, how do I digitize my canvas or whatever? And as someone who loves digital art as its own form, the idea that you're going to like chuck some digital sauce on your analog work at the end as like an afterthought just to capitalize on money like makes me kind of sad. Like I'm sure there are like thoughtful use cases and ways to do that that are sort of meaningful, but like I don't see digitization or digital as a selling route or just like a marketing thing. I see it as like its own art form. So it would be like if sculpture got really popular all of a sudden and you were a painter for 20 years and all of a sudden you're like, sculpture is popular. How do I turn my painting into a sculpture so that I can sell it for more, right? So like, and it's like, well, that may not be the thing here, but I mean, there is interesting. It's a decent blockchain is a decentralized database and it's tamper proof, right? Which is awesome for provenance, regardless if it's physical or digital.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about, especially with. I remember all those startups that kind of came out and were the stickers that you put on the back of physical pieces that connect to an NFT. But there are a lot of issues with that, and I've had people ask me if I sell, if they buy prints, if it comes with an NFT and things like that. I keep it very separated for a lot of different reasons, but there's a lot of difficulty around connecting a physical piece and a digital piece forever. It just is very hard to do. And when, not only that it's very hard to do, but you don't really have the control over it. Collectors can decide to sell one of those items. And if
Yep.
the person who's buying it on the secondary market isn't doing their research and knowing that this piece was originally sold with something else, another counterpart, it's a weird disconnect, and it's something that I personally think should be separated. But if there's someone creating some really epic way to track, the digital history on a physical piece, like, cool. But for now, I don't know if there's anything that does that seamlessly, at least that I know of.
Yeah, and also I think, and I catch myself on this. we need a higher tolerance for experimentation. That was the biggest
Hmm.
difference between 2017, 18, and now. You know, I see, because I knew like John and John from Super Rare when they first launched, like they're the cool people. They aren't like the man, right? But I think
Hmm.
people that are just like showing up to this space are like, how come I can't get in and this, that, and the other? And I'm like, whoa, these guys helped build this whole space, and like they work so hard, and like if things don't work, and most of their stuff does work, but I actually want more platforms that are risky and don't work, that are trying new things, right? Whether
Yeah,
that's stickers on the back of canvas or whatever. Like it's too early for us to get comfortable and settle in with like, okay, here's how it works. There's a platform, you
totally.
sign in and you try to sell your stuff from here. Like I want more dramatic. Like when CryptoPunks came out, there was no template for that, right?
Right.
And even when Rare Pepe came out, there was no template for that, and we haven't seen. I guess maybe async, and now I get it wrong all the time. It's either Art Blocks or Block Arts that's doing some interesting
Art
stuff.
blocks, yeah.
Yeah, I like that's the kind of stuff I want to see, even if it fails. Like I really don't want us to get comfortable with like, okay, here's how it works. Now let's just do 20 of these platforms.
I'm totally with you. Also, sorry if you can hear my cat crying in the background. They're very attention hungry today. I apologize. But no, I totally agree with you. And I always talk about that, how this is a space for innovators, and like there's always something new coming up. Like augmented reality was like something that was never happening. And now it's like a thing that is like art, any physical art, like artists or even digital artists are creating augmented reality for it. So it's like these weird things that are like, it's old news. Like I want to see more. And it's so cool to see different, like you said, like even if it fails, it's cool to see, and we need to see people still innovating and bringing this space forward, or else it becomes too much of a norm. And then when it becomes a norm, in my opinion, you start to get people who think they're on top, that have been doing this for a while, and like teach everyone else coming into this space and like show them the way, when really the exciting thing about this space, because it is still so new, is that someone who came in 2 months ago can become someone who is now challenging other people to push the boundaries and be creative and bring new ideas to the space. And there's been, I did a talk on, I forget what it was. It was during COVID, so but it was a while ago, a virtual talk where you have round like tables that you break up and like talk at the end. And you click to go to each table. And I was chatting with a guy there who had just discovered what NFTs were, was totally had no idea. And then I would say his name, but I don't know if he'd mind. But he went on, and now he's like has a ton of followers on Twitter, and is like doing a co-host to a show. And within like 4 months, he was 0 to 100, and he's
Yep.
bringing new ideas to the space. And like that's the kind of stuff that gets me so excited. Like it doesn't have to be someone who's been here for years, but as long as you have the right, if you find your culture and your clique in this, and you have the right intentions, you can do something really cool and make a change, a difference, in the space, which I just think is epic. So I totally agree with you that we just need to keep pushing and not get comfortable where we are.
And
Um,
catch each other. Part of your point, I
yeah,
think, good. Catch each other when we're grumpy to the new people, right? So like I had such a warm embrace when I came into the space with no background in crypto, and I think most people know. I mean, I own some Bitcoin, and I know I own some Ethereum, but I came to this because I wanted to solve art problems, and I have a background in art and tech. I'm not going to impress anyone with my crypto investment. I think I actually may be the world's worst crypto investor. I always sell low when it's low, and I always buy high. And like
let
it's
me know when you're buying and selling.
yeah, you could just fade me. It's comical. So I disc golf with Joe Looney. You know, we've gotten pretty close over the last 5 or 6 months, and every other week or so we'd go out disc golf. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he like calmly answers my questions, and I get like, so I have access to some of the best advice on like crypto investing ever, and I still don't listen, and I still manage to just like lose money like hand over fist. But I mean, there's part of me that's a bit of a gambler, which is not the way to invest, but it's entertaining for me. So but yeah,
Yeah.
be nice. We need to police each other. If you see me being mean to someone who's new in the space, remind me that I was, more ignorant than anyone when I first came in, and everyone was nice to me.
I'm totally with you on that. Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that, and just welcoming other folks in the space as well, because we've all been there. Um, Etta Toddy said, "You are a legend in the crypto art world."
Oh, thank you.
And everyone's saying great info. If you guys also have more questions, definitely feel free and pop them in the chat. Like I said, we're going to be able, I'd love to answer any of your questions live. Uh, she said you could never be mean to anyone.
Well, I mean, I think I have like two enemies or whatever, and I don't think I started it, but I mean, two people that don't like me.
Okay.
That's okay. I think, I try to be like positive even when I'm not in a good mood, especially on Twitter. And I think that annoys people that are generally in bad moods because they're like,
Mm.
this guy's got to be full of shit and like faking it because no one's that happy, that often. But I'm often just trying to project where I want to be, right? I mean, that's true for me in general. I'm trying to appear. I think if I give out happy vibes, it'll make me happier. When I do my predictions, my art market predictions, a lot of it's just on where I want to see things go, even if I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to go there, because I'm trying to say like this is the way it should go, right?
Right.
So like I do believe that you can lead by example and try to be positive. But yeah, I'm definitely not everyone's bag, but that's okay.
That's okay. No one can be everyone's bag. I
Right.
I, I believe that. Also, I've never heard that term, and I just repeated it, which is kind of weird. Everyone's bag. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's like it's not my bag. I don't know. This is like grandpa speak. Now that I'm old, this is the other good thing about hanging out with all the crypto art folks. It keeps me young. So I know now not to say like everyone's bag because no one knows what that
No,
is.
no, I totally understood it, but I've just never heard it. And I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
I don't
over
even.
here repeating it, so maybe it's going to become a part of my vocabulary now.
Yeah, I don't. I have to figure out what the origins are, but it's like, yeah, that's not my bag. Like I'm not into that.
That's really funny. Yeah, no, I understood it right away, but I didn't know. I was telling um, Cryptography last time when I was chatting with him. I'm rolling my eyes because I'm saying his name correctly, even though I never do. That he, so he has, he's a funny guy, but like sometimes I have very, I don't know if it's because I didn't grow up with TV, but like I swear I think my humor is like totally off kilter and I don't get a lot of humor. So sometimes when he's making a joke, I'm like, is he serious or is he kidding? And I'm not sure. And he's like, oh, maybe my jokes are just bad. And I'm like, no, it's a personal problem. Your jokes are actually, once I realize that you're kidding, like, I totally get it and I think it's funny, but he has more of like the dry humor. Um,
Yeah, he's great. I love cryptography,
yeah.
cryptography as you want to say it, and I agree that he's got a pretty dry sense of humor.
Yeah. But sometimes I just think he's being serious with stuff. And I'm like, or like after I said my sponsor last episode, he goes on to say his sponsor, and it was like these like nuts or whatever, which sounds so dumb, but the way that he said it sounded, I was like, what, like how did he just come up with this on the spot? Is he being serious? Like, is this actually a sponsor?
I
um
listened to it and I'm still not sure, so I'm right there with you. Like, is
yeah,
that
no,
the actual sponsor?
he no, he just made that up on the spot, which was
I'll be
really impressive.
sponsored by
Yeah, what are you drinking? Let's
Trader
hear.
Good, Worcester, local brewery, Pulp
Pulp
Daddy.
Daddy, love it.
I'm a little disappointed, Josie, that you don't have an alcoholic beverage.
I
I thought
know.
I've watched your other
I
shows and
know.
I'm like, people are usually drinking.
And I
Actually, I think
drink
it
too.
was Twisted Vacancy when I
Oh
first
my,
watched.
he was like
I thought
smoking and drinking.
Yeah, I thought he was like burning some trees. I thought he was smoking a big joint at first, and I was like, "Go Twisted Vacancy," and I'm like, "Oh wait, that's just a cigarette."
I think, oh, DJJ Skrilla, I think he smoked some weed on stream. Um I think
Okay, go on.
Jim smoked before the stream and drank on the stream. There's plenty of really cool alcohol on this stream too. Like I love seeing everyone's. I'm not a big beer guy, but I love seeing everyone's different beer choices because I don't know a lot about them. But I think more often than not, people buy local beer, which I think is so cool. So it has like you just said, that's like a local brand. So I think it's so cool to see everyone's sort of local beer from their area. Really, I drink rum, which is kind of weird, but I like dark and stormies. And then sometimes
Nice.
I do wine when I don't have any ginger beer. So yeah, I kind of drink weird stuff, but
No, I like ginger beer, and yeah, I used to think of myself as sort of a beer aficionado until I realized I just usually choose the ones with the most alcohol, and I don't think that makes you an aficionado. It makes you something else. But
that's really funny. Um, Oh yeah, a lot of money did too. Martin Lucas said. Oh, he also did ask a question. I would be curious to hear Jason's take on art projects on other chains, and if he thinks that some overarching standard slash directory might be a direction that might develop.
Like non-Ethereum chains.
Yes, I'm assuming.
Yeah, someone actually offered, or pointed me towards a non-Ethereum chain, and I guess the fact that I can't remember it is part of the problem with that. Is that like Ethereum kind of dominated in terms of people's mind space for like where you would go. I'd like to see people, when I first started writing about this space and thinking about it and was like taken up in the movement, I was like, we don't need platforms. Every artist is going to write their own contract. And like, we're getting rid of the middleman. Every artist is going to write their own contract. And then, so super rare, you should build out a thing so everyone can do their own thing. No one wants to be on a platform, right? I gave all this horrible advice and like wrote all these things out on the assumption that all I heard was like decentralization, decentralization, decentralization. But it turns out that if you tokenize your work and no one was interested in it before, it's like if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, did it fall? Like, it's not like people come magically running like, oh, so and so tokenized their work. So there's a genuine tried and true service that like Super Rare and Known Origin and Async are providing by kind of marketing this work and getting it in front of collectors, right? So I think to be more specific to answer the question, it's hard for other chains to do that, but I like that they exist. I don't think we should ever be in a spot where there's only one, that we consolidate around one chain or one solution or one platform or one approach. So if someone can solve, for example, it's challenging to me that the environmental damage thing has come up that Memo Aitken wrote about. I mean, it's not something I feel comfortable ignoring, right? He's written a pretty, I'm not an expert and I don't know exactly, the background on it, but it's fairly scathing. And I know I buy and create NFTs, right? So if I know we're supposed to move to POS from POW, and I think that'll help a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
if there are other chains that can help us work around that, I'm all for it. And then, and the second part of the question, if I sort of understood it, like how do we document or manage this kind of stuff? I think the big thing there would be this: how do we get the mandatory minimum of 10% secondary royalty across multiple platforms? That from day one has been a big part of why I care about the space and why I'm willing to put energy and effort into it and like try to promote it. And the platforms are doing good with it independently, but I still get people that want to buy work in my collection from Super Rare or Known Origin on OpenSea, and I don't even know, maybe part of it's education, but I don't think that by default respects the 10% royalty from the other platforms.
Yeah, no. I definitely know what you mean with just like other, OpenSea and everyone like being able to implement the cross-platform royalties and everything like that and how important it is. I have even seen, I mean, even for me, I've had people, I have my contract on OpenSea. I am independent of a lot of art platforms, but even still being on OpenSea, some people choose to do private transactions, and I've had some people after the fact, offering to send me my royalty, which is really cool to see. But as the space grows, that's not going to be something that people even know. They're not going to know that they're avoiding your royalty when they're doing a private transaction, because if it's a part of a bundle or like XYZ reason, who knows? They're not going to know that, or not really care that much because it doesn't like affect them. So I think that is something that's interesting to think about. With what you said, I do know what you mean with the okay, well, at first I was preaching this decentralized, everyone needs their own contract, blah, blah, blah. And now I realize that's not necessarily what is right for everyone. I definitely agree that it's not right for everyone, but I will say that I do think it's right for some people.
Yeah.
And we've seen obviously like Joy be really successful with having his own contract, and he is such a crazy mind, the things that he's able to do, and he wants to be done in really unique ways, and he builds it and makes it happen. And I've also been really happy with the route that I went, not going on art platforms and using something like OpenSea where it's more of a platform for everything with my art for different reasons. So I have seen it work definitely, but there are advantages and disadvantages to all of it for sure. So I did just want to bring that up.
Yeah, I think
Um,
Joy is the example that I give too. I
mhm.
thought if you asked me in early 2018, I would say everyone in 2021 was going to be Joy, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
have their own contract, their own independent thing that they did. And but in a lot of ways, I'm not surprised now and in retrospect that that didn't happen. And I think, you know, these other platforms really do a service by connecting artists to collectors.
Yeah. Um, just has some people joining in. Hey, easy. Um, and good question. Uh, Wrong Bedroom asked, how does Artnome feel about sameness in art, and is there room for more Duchamp like artists who radically shift between disciplines on the blockchain?
Yeah, I think all digital art um, has a tendency to become homogenous, which is a big fancy word, like all, look that's the same. You know, and that's because the tools are algorithmic. The way computers work is, you know, based on code, and code is largely algorithmic. And algorithms, sort of by default, force us all into sameness. So I think artists have to go out of their way to actually try to break from that sameness. There's some strategies I think that work well. One of them is integrating analog and digital. So there's an I'm going to art geek out here for a second, but there's entropy involved in physical work that isn't involved in digital work as often, unless you kind of seek it out with glitch art or something. And even glitch art starts to all look the same after a while. So when you can take your physical art, bring it in digitally, take it back out physically, and bring it in digitally, and kind of use a blend of tools, often that's a great way to break the algorithmic trap, which can force all the work to start to look the same. I wrote a little bit about this. I was super lucky, got to write the cover story for Art in America last January, and it was about how the tools shape digital tools have shaped art in the last 20 years. And at the end, the kind of the conclusion I come to is that we kind of have to go intentionally out of our way to try to break, you know, the algorithmic art is generative art is like my passion, right? But if we're not conscientious about it, it's inevitable that the new effect or the new look gets used so broadly that
Mm.
everything kind of looks the same, right? So I don't make much art anymore, and when I do, I would say it's probably not that spectacular or important. But I intentionally try to make stuff that's like somewhat unsellable, and it still kind of sells, which I appreciate my collectors. You know, they're sort of so I. You know, I took a picture of the pavement, thought it looked like the stars, and put it on top of a photo from NASA. And it was, you know, I'm intentionally trying to make stuff that's less sellable, right? Even if it's not great, just because I think leading by example and being like, hey, you know, not everything kind of has to be made for the market. I mean, I get it. Artists are trying to eat, right? And like, you know, if you put the you know the vaporwave with the bitcoins, and like, you know, there's certain kind of things that you can combine, and some of that works awesome. I think, you know, your work in cryptography's work incorporate some of that stuff in a way that I think is like you could trace it back to like Shepard Fairey or folks like that. They're doing like modern protest art, right? So there's like a way to trace that through art history, and it's, you know, sophisticated and interesting. But there's also sort of a formula now where it's like, okay, what's the fastest thing? Like, how do I photo mosh like an Ethereum symbol enough times that I can like, you
Yeah.
know, sell something, you know? So, but I also, you know, this is maybe something to talk about. There's like this art snobbery thing that I struggle with myself, right? So um, I want art to be more like basketball is for me. So I'm a big basketball fan. That's my passions are art and basketball. And when I drive by a bunch of little kids playing basketball on the side of the road, I'm not like, oh, they're not even any good, right? I'm thinking like, that's awesome. Those kids are
Yeah.
playing basketball, and I love basketball, right? But in art, there's this weird thing where we're worried that if we like work that's not super high quality, people will think we have bad taste. So
Mm.
when you see someone who's just starting, we're like, oh, their work stinks or that's garbage. And I want to get us and myself, and this is as much a message to me as anyone else, to a spot where we can be happy for people wherever they are in their journey, and actually try to build a mechanism that kind of helps them pull along. You know, the analogy I use is like in the fancy pants art world, the ladder is like only has one rung and it's all the way at the top, and no one can reach it unless someone like puts you there, and it's like, you know, who they choose. And I think our ladder in the crypto art space should have a clear path for people that want to work, learn, and grow and get pause. You know, maybe in the beginning their stuff isn't selling, but emotional support is just as important as financial support, and figuring out a way to help people stay, you know, with it, right, until they can get better over time. Like, I think we have a responsibility to try to build a culture that moves in that direction. Otherwise, this whole crypto thing is just like a new payment system for art, which is pretty boring, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
if you think about crypto as just like Visa Part 2 or whatever, MasterCard Part 2 for art, that's not like where I think you or I or these people want our legacy. So it has to be what we do culturally different that's actually going to be the legacy.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. And that's great just advice to give to other folks too, even new artists and collectors coming into the space, that it is and needs to be so much bigger than that. And it's not called crypto art because you're buying with crypto. I mean, for everyone, there's different meanings of crypto art, but it does have to be so much more than that. So I think that's definitely an interesting point. And I do also like that point that you're even giving that advice to yourself um, of looking at art like you're more, not judging people, and you're more excited that more and more people are coming in and trying to do something with their creativeness and their skills. So I think that's an interesting point that um, we all need to think about sometimes, for
Right,
sure.
because and the reason I like the basketball analogy is because look, I love the Michael Jordans of the art world too, right? And I don't look at not those kids that I saw in the playground that I was psyched that they were playing. I'm not going to treat them or act like they're Michael Jordan. So it's not like I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say the brand new artists that are just like spreading their wings are like the best in the space, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
disingenuous. I think you need to be able to do both, like I would in basketball, where it's like
Right.
I think no matter what skill level you're at, you're doing something I love, and I'm glad that you're discovering it. But I'm also gonna heap crazy praise on the people that I think are just like out of control good by my standards, which is maybe a thing that I'll throw in here. I don't know if people will have questions around it. It tends to be an unpopular opinion, and I wonder if it's because I'm older that I have it, like if it's generational. But I get a lot of flack on Twitter because I kind of hero worship artists, right? I mean, I grew up
Mm.
hero worshiping artists. My heroes growing up were painters and artists, and now even with contemporary artists, some folks in the crypto space, people will be like, oh geez, like we don't need to have like one or two artists getting all the attention, and like shouldn't everybody get the same amount of attention, and this, that, and the other. And I actually don't think that everyone should get the same amount of attention. I think part of what I love about art is that there every once in a while someone comes along who's just like miraculously mind-bendingly like talented and good, and that should be celebrated. It doesn't have to happen to the exclusion of everybody else, which is I think what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not in this because periodically someone rocks your world with like the art they produce, then what the hell are you doing? Like, what are you even here for, right? You
Totally.
know, I don't know, but I don't know if you see that, but I feel back pressure sometimes from people that are like, dude, like stop getting so excited over this random person's art. I'm like, why else would I be here? Like this is
Yeah.
what like this is why I'm here.
That's interesting. And to think of like what um I didn't know that you get flack for that, but now I want to look out for it, because I think it's interesting to even see how other people perceive your passion and your excitement. And for that, I mean, that's for anyone. Uh, but it is super interesting to see. And do you find that it's mostly coming from other artists, or what do you think?
Yeah, I don't mean to say that those people are in the wrong, and this is why I bring it up because it's a challenge for me. So someone who I'll give an example of someone who I have like endless respect for and consider like a mentor in many ways, who I think is thoughtfully trying to debunk some of my star system thoughts. So John Maeda, who is the dean at RISD and ran MIT Media Lab, early generative artist pioneer in like the 80s and the 90s. I think has said that it's not super healthy for this idea of the individual genius in the same way like companies or a software company or all these things that are so great that took lots of people to build. It'd be better if we move away from this myth of the individual genius, right, which can be damaging, and find ways that we can work collectively. And if it's less about I own this and one person made it and that's why it's great, and more about what is it that we can create creatively together, and couldn't that kind of go beyond what any individual can create. So he's really, elegant in his description of it. And I think that that's what some of the people that are restricted to the characters on Twitter are trying to tell me as well. And I'm sensitive to that as a positive direction, that we move away from the haves and the have-nots. But at the same time, I just can't help change the fact that the reason I'm here is because individual genius and ability to produce a vision that would get watered down across multiple people is like the most exciting part of my life. When I get to go to see a show for an artist that I haven't seen before, and my like just my eyes are melting because I'm like, wow, like I can't even like describe the experience that I'm having. Very rarely, as someone who's worked 20 years in tech on large, medium, and small teams, usually the bigger the more people there are involved, you can do amazing things, but you don't get that weird, outrageous individual vision that you
Yeah,
can get from the individual artist. So I don't know, it's more, this is like confession, this is more like me trying to
I
say
like
like
that.
I'm trying to figure out how to come to terms with it. And I don't think I want to give up. I do think artists are like sacred and special, and shamans, and like you know need to be treated differently than other people.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I think when you do have people connect with art in so many different ways, and even with the same artist in different pieces, each piece you connect with in a different way. So if you have that sort of feeling when you're connecting with that artwork, I don't see any problem with sharing that and praising that because it's something special for you. And the cool thing about it is that everyone has their own special thing that they connect with. So if everyone was sharing these like aha moments of when they're discovering a new artist and new pieces, it would feel a little bit less like not like one artist is being praised and we'd all be praising the people that we connect with. So I think maybe it's something that maybe needs to just happen more often from different people. Um,
That's awesome, and that's essentially what I say it partially to get out of getting in a corner on Twitter, but I do mean it, which is that like, hey, we need more. Don't you think we need more praise? Praise is free, and
mhm,
it should be sincere. But I think we're all in
right.
this art space because we sincerely like art, right? So like let the praise fly freely, because not everyone is selling a bunch of work, and people will say, well, like, isn't that this happened on Twitter the other day, and I don't mean to call anyone out, but it's the things that I think about. They're like, well, that's true of anyone, not just artists. I was like, hey, making art's tough because your whole emotional identity is tied into, your ability to continuously be creative. And there's like lots of times when you're not feeling creative and you feel worthless, basically, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what your identity is tied to. So it's like, hey, be nice to, give an artist a compliment. Be nice to them today because like their identity is completely tied to this nonstop pressure to be creative, and a lot of times they're not feeling it. And then someone was like, well, isn't that true for everyone? And I'm like, oh, like I don't think people get it. Like, you
Yeah.
know, I've done creative work and I've done non-creative work and I've done weird artsy creative work, and like that's often thankless. And I think it is different for artists from other people because you're pouring your emotions and yourself into it in a way that not every job does, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is such, I mean, you're 100% spot on when it is a different connection that artists have with their work, and it's not even a connection, it's literally like an extension. And that's not always, even if you work and or if you built your own company, it's still there's still differences within it. Um, and yeah, I totally agree with you there. Um, Praise what connects with you, Easy said. Totally agree. Here for the art. Haters gonna hate. Got that comment too. um, awesome. So I would love to hear. I'm gonna open my door really quick because I'm worried that my cat's crying because maybe the door closed on her and she wants to get out. So give me
No
one quick
worries.
second, but I have another question for you.
Sure. Is that Frida? Frida, you want to say hi? Frida, you want to say hello? Frida. Say hello.
Sorry
Say
about that.
hello.
Oh, puppy! What? And you said Frida? What's your dog's name? Frida?
This is Frida. Yep. So she
Aw,
came with that name, but we kept it because of Frida Kahlo.
I love that.
Yep. Say hi, Frida.
Hi,
Say hello.
Frida. She's so cute. What kind of dog is she?
She's a mutt. She's from Puerto Rico, and she's like a blend of everything.
Aw.
So we don't have kids, and we're nerds. So we paid for 2 DNA tests to see like what
Uh
her
huh.
background was.
Uh
I'm gonna
huh.
send her with her mom. Go see mom.
She
Um, and okay, well, maybe she's gonna
wants to
hang.
hang out.
Um, the DNA test said she's like everything under the sun but a quarter Basset,
Oh, okay.
which makes sense because Bassets are really stubborn,
Mm.
um, and she's super stubborn. But like Bassets are stubborn but slow, so
Mm-hmm.
like it's okay. The saving grace that they're stubborn is like, well, at least they're not going to take off. But
Yeah.
she's stubborn and fast, so she
Oh,
like runs away, ignores you, and like But she's great.
what age did you get her at?
I think she was like 4 months,
Okay.
and she's about 4 years now. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, my mother-in-law rescued a street dog from the Bahamas. She has some family there. So she and I mean this was a long time ago before I knew her, like maybe 10 years ago. And Chili is the dog's name and they call them pop cakes, which I didn't
Yep.
even know that was a thing. And she's such I mean they rescued her as a puppy, but she still has so much wild dog in her. And even like they live in the burbs and they had coyotes in their backyard last year
Wow.
that started to attack their other dog who's actually even bigger than Chili, and Chili went into full street dog mode, like you're not messing with us, and like saved the other dog from the coyote. And I'm like, that is just crazy that they can like turn it on like that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, Frida has that for sure. So they call them satos when they're strays from Puerto
Mm.
Rico. And the other day, I take her for her run every morning. She's my personal trainer. And the other day, I was driving, and there was some guy. He was just in my blind spot. I was at a stop, and I didn't see him. And I went to go, and he was like this big, burly. I mean, I'm a big dude, but this guy was like much bigger than me, and like started to come aggressively towards my window. I mean, my fault, right? I kind of should have
Mm.
like looked more. I didn't hit him or anything, and he started coming to my window. Frida went nuts, just started headbutting the window, like growling, snarling,
Oh
or
my
whatever.
gosh.
And the guy like wanted no part of it. He was just
He's
like,
like,
"Nope,
never
uh,
mind.
see you
That's good.
later."
That's
Yeah.
that's kind of cool though to have a dog that's like, dude, I got your back. Like we're in this together. Don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, Frida is street. All our dogs have been mad street. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I'm really glad I let my cat out because I did realize the door was closing on her, and as I was going over, I realized she was like trying to dig through clothes in the closet. And I'm like, dude, if she had to pee that whole time or something, they've
Oh.
never had an accident. But I was like, I'm so glad I just opened the door for her because I don't know what she was about to do. Um, anyways, um, yeah, it's pet time. I love pet time. I always end up talking about pets on the show because I just think pets are so darn cool and they make everyone happier and they're best friends. Any pet.
Yep, one of the best parts of life for sure.
Yeah, which is why you'd bring Frida on that on the island when you go to hibernate.
She's my baby.
If anyone has more questions, definitely feel free and ask them. I'm soon gonna start asking the closing questions for you, but before that, is there anything that you are especially excited about that you want to share? Something you're working on, or something you've heard about, or just in general about the overall space with digital art and NFTs? I know it's kind of a broad question, but just in case you have anything top of mind that you want to share.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I'm working on writing something for Furtherfield around DAOs, and talking about how, so they've got sort of this grant program that they've done, where there are communities around the world that are doing sort of decentralized projects to try to emphasize that it's not just about individuals buying and selling a bunch of art, that blockchain's actually doing interesting things culturally, group wise, in art that's maybe not even sellable at all. That's kind of moving in different directions. So they were super nice to reach out to me on that, and I need to kind of kick it into high gear and do some writing around that. But writing about things that are less about money and the traditional obvious routes, and ways that communities are using decentralization and DAOs, and these writing assignments are opportunities for me to learn more too. And Furtherfield's
Yeah.
great. They wrote this or published this book on some of the early blockchain pioneers, which was all these artists that were doing much more experimental things that were like essentially unsellable, right? It's back in the early days. So that's one thing that it's kind of neat that I get to work on. And then Casey Reese, who co-founded Processing, which is this open source language that like everyone uses for generative art. is launching a platform that's designed to be super artist and curator friendly. So I think one of the things that's exciting and new and different about this space is how fast everything moves. It's like make a work that morning, sell it that night, like everything moves quickly, and that's neat and it's different. But there is something that gets lost when you feel pressure to move so quickly, right? So I think Casey's platform, part of what's trying to do is slow things down a little bit so you can spend some time writing about the artwork and the artists,
Mm.
and like, put together an exhibition that combines works in a different way. I mean, as a curator, we didn't get into that, but I do a bunch of curation, and I'll be curating for Casey's platform. I don't think it's announced yet, but I've committed to November of next year. As a curator, I think the meaning of any given artwork really changes dramatically when you put it next to other artworks, right? And you put it under a different framework. And one of the things that I think the traditional, maybe perhaps more snobby art world, can't deal with when they come to Super Rare or one of these other places is like things aren't curated. There's just like
Yeah.
everything is kind of flowing all at once. And I hear that a lot on Clubhouse from the traditional art world folks. And I try to use this analogy for them that like, well, it's like if you went to a used record store, would you really want to show up at the used record store and they just say, "Here's the Beatles album that you want," like right at the door, and you leave? Like, what kind of
Mm.
collecting is that, right? Like the fun is to kind of go through and flip through like 100 things that like you didn't know existed that you would never
Yeah.
buy, but it's like kind of
Discover.
weird, right? So like if collecting isn't also curating, like what are these people doing? Just like, oh, this person's famous, I must own one of these works, right? Like you have to sift through the stuff, I think, to get there. So I guess I simultaneously defended the need for a platform like Casey's, but also the need for a platform like Super Rare, because I think, both are valid. But yeah, no, so I think some curation with Casey's going to be cool. And then I curate for Kate Voss out of Zurich too. And we've been talking about, for all the focus and success that we're seeing in crypto art, a big part of my mission is how do I highlight the old masters of digital. It's weird to call them old masters, but the artists from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'm lucky that I can get paid and some support to try to spend a little more time digging in and do shows that kind of feature those folks and connect modern digital artists more to their history. And I think we could do a whole show on whether or not we even care if the traditional art world recognizes what we do, right? But I do think one of the things that they're missing is like, where's the historical underpinning for all of this?
Mm.
And there is a historical underpinning. It's just that a lot of people don't know it, right? And that's part of what I want to kind of bring to the forefront.
And have you written a lot about the history of this? I'm assuming yes, but have you?
Yeah, there's an article that I'd point folks to called "Why Love Generative Art." It's
Mm-hmm.
probably like the article that I've written that has the most views or whatever. And I think if you just look up generative art, it's one of the first things that pops up. And it's really like my love letter to generative art, but it's also my love letter to art history, right? So I talk about the trends through all of art history that brought us up through the 40s, 50s, and 60s into sort of geometric minimalism and things like that, and how those are a logical sequence right into where digital art picks up, right? And it's not, people treat digital art and generative art like it's some weird bastard child, like, that's like disconnected from the rest of art history. But there's this great thread that kind of fluidly goes through the development of all of art history and goes like right into digital art. And I think, I mean, I have no question that 50, 60 years from now, that's how art history will be taught. Like people aren't going to look at our generation and our time and be like, and no offense to analog painters, but they're not going to be like, wow, that was like a really innovative brushstroke that came out in the 2020s, right? It's going to be like, oh my God, art went digital, right? And like,
Right.
so once the art world like wakes up from their slumber and figures out that like the whole movement they're like sleeping on, that it is like what matters is digital art, I hope to help them along the way by being like, look, there's this bridge, this logical bridge. It's not this weird thing that has to like come out of left field. It's actually a really logical evolution from traditional art history.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I love that there's someone like you that is teaching people even like me. I don't know the history of digital art. It's not something that I'm necessarily creating art because of or for. I'm in this for a different reason, but it's something that I'm interested in and I would love to learn more about. So I'm definitely going to check out the article because I haven't read it yet. So that's awesome to hear. Um, Martin Lucas asked, "Will Jason create more art anytime soon?" I'm not sure if he continues with the mandalas, the generative mandalas.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna shut the door because I can. Well, I just want to not bug my wife. But the mandalas, again, I kind of intentionally try to lead by example and do things to try to nudge this whole. I mean, I don't think I'm that big of an influencer, but some people listen to me. So I try to do through my actions things that I think are healthy for the ecosystem. And right as I'm starting to see everything sell for like more and more and more money, I wanted to sell a bunch of stuff for less and less and less money. So I produced this infinite mandala series, right, where like pretty much anyone could pay whatever they wanted, and I've written the code that I can produce them endlessly. And interestingly, after a few days, no one wanted them. I mean, maybe they're not the best thing in the world, but they're pretty cool. And I'm almost certain that if I was selling them at like $500 or $1,000 a pop,
Oh
I
yeah.
would still be getting interest right now. But so many people are driven by price instead of an authentic understanding of art. And I don't mean that as a knock. Like, it's just, if you don't have a background in art, it's hard to be confident in what you're buying, right? And I think the easiest thing to do is to be like, what's selling for a lot? Those artists must be good. I want to own that stuff, right? So I was like, well, how do I like destroy my own market and sell a bunch of stuff that's fairly decent for like as little as someone wants to pay for it? And I think when people started seeing it like leaves that you could pick up off the ground because it was so cheap, they're like, well, then I don't want them. They're like they want to pay more if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. So to answer Martin's question, I do think I'm going to spend some more time, hopefully, in relearning, processing, and doing some more generative work, largely for my own therapeutic purposes. But there is a reality even for me. I'm not rich. I should make that clear. My wife works at Starbucks, and I work for myself. And some months I don't have enough clients or whatever, so I'm not some richy rich art world dude. And when I sell work on Super Rare, just like a lot of people listening to this, that gives me the hours to make more work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm appreciative of Super Rare and these other platforms and my collectors, that I don't make as much work as everyone else. Because like I meant to say this in the beginning, Josie, but I have a lot of respect for you because when you do this podcast, with different people, you could be off doing your own work, right? And it takes, you're lifting everyone else up in the community and going out of your way and sacrificing time that you could be doing your own work to lift other people, right? And I think that's sort of was a decision I made too 2 or 3 years ago, where I could be off making, especially now that work's selling, like everything is selling for $1,000 or more, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I could, be not writing or not on this podcast or not talking to people and just be like, how do I crank this money machine, right?
Yeah.
I think it takes people that actually want to be glue people and try to move everyone up together too.
Yeah. No, that's great. Also, well, I can tell you that there's a couple of people in the chat that do want some of your art. So you're definitely going to have to release more of those, and you guys are going to have to look out for his work. But I totally agree with you that it takes people who are in this for to lift everyone up to keep moving the space. And that's a big goal of this show. Right now, I always like I don't even the views and stuff. It's such a small number that it doesn't necessarily. That's not what I'm looking at. I think about the future and all of us looking back on this. People watching their own interviews. People watching the interviews after their artwork is selling. They're finally getting known or whatever it is. Like I just want to have passionate people on the show to talk about their passion, which we share, which is pretty cool. So yeah, no, it's a cool thing, and I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna start asking you some of the closing questions, and before I do that, I'm gonna do a really quick ad because I was supposed to do it at the beginning, and then I'll ask you the three closing questions, which are kind of fun. And the ad this month, you guys know that I work with Metacast, which is an awesome crew that creates or connects. Sorry, I can't even speak anymore. Metacast connects creators with companies that want to talk about something cool that they're working on. So this month, on the shows this month, I'll be promoting Whale Street, and I'm going to pop it up on the screen here and read their little blurb for you guys, and then This is their website. Whale Street is a part of the crew. Actually, we had Tubador on the show. He's a part of Whale Street and Metacoven. They created B20, which is the token behind the fractionalized Beepleworks. So they are the sponsor this month. And I guess with that said, something that's important that should be said, which I got a question on it when I had Tubador on the stream. None of my streams are paid promotions. I invite people on because I genuinely think they have something cool to share with everyone else. And that's it. And if I ever had someone on that was paying me to come on my show, I don't think that would ever happen, but if it did, I would let you guys know. With that said, Whale Street is a DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They take in large currency swaps. They call them whale swaps with small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens, which is what we were just chatting about, which launched a couple weeks ago. Whale Street is about the upside, and then also in the YouTube link box, I linked their Discord and then also their Twitter, so you can check them out and find out anything you need to know with them. So that's my ad. Thanks for listening, guys. And like I said, it's all linked down below. And I did want to say that in the beginning that I don't know. It was weird. Someone asked me, they're like, "Did you get paid for having so and so on the show?" I was like, "That'd be pretty cool, but no." No, I didn't. But I didn't think that needed to be said. But I'm just gonna say it. Jason did not pay me to come on my show.
I want my money back, Josie.
Yeah. Okay, closing questions. What is your favorite? Oh, and by the way, shout out to, I didn't know your wife worked at Starbucks. I used to work there. And there were things I loved about Starbucks and a lot of things I hated about it. And it's a hard job. So good for her. And it takes a toll on your body. You do meet a lot of amazing people, but you also meet a lot of shitty people. So I know it's a hard job. So hats off to her for that.
Yeah, I worked there for a while when I was younger too. So yeah, totally. They're good for retail. They're good to their partners, but
yeah,
that'll be my sponsor.
okay.
Hats off to Starbucks for employing me and my wife at various times.
Awesome. Okay. What is your favorite item you've bought this year?
Ooh, this year. Favorite item that I bought this year. I bought Frederick Van Hoot. I think I'm probably going to get the name wrong. On Known Origin, a generative artwork that has like tons of detail. Let me see. I'll get the name and the work right. It's important.
Okay.
Let's see. So his name on Known Origin is W. Blut, and the name of the work is Where the Streets Have No Valid Drone Delivery ID Code. Big fan of that work, and I think his name, and let me check Twitter, Frederick Van Hoot. Yeah, there's some of these folks that are sort of OG generative artists that come from like the Flash days and stuff, who I recognize from forums from like my youth or whatever, or years ago. And he's one of them who I knew I wanted to get a piece. I was just waiting for the right one. That one's great. And then Dmitry Cherniak's dropped the other day on Art Blocks. I got like one of the simplest ones, because like you don't know what you're gonna get. It just generates like 1,000 of them, and they're like all these crazy ones with color and like filigree design. And mine is like the most basic minimalist one ever. But I love it the same way I love like the mutts, like my Frida.
Yeah.
And, like, it's like it's one that only a father could love or whatever. But I did get a bid. I got a bid on it like right away for like 8 times what I bought it for like the next day, and I was like, well, that's nuts, like nuts market. But yeah, those two have made me really happy in a way that like they'll continue. Those are 2 works that'll continue to make me happy as long as I have them.
I love that. That's so cool. If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
What would I instantly become an expert in? I think maybe like mindfulness and meditation and Zen. I find when the market and the crypto world and crypto art world gets really buzzy, I start to get buzzy. I don't sleep as well, and I feel like I'm FOMOing all the time, and like that like there's not really anything I'm missing out on, but it just feels like I am. And the ability to kind of quickly get myself centered and like remember that like none of that really matters. Like
Yeah.
that it's going to be up and down, and like stay centered would be nice.
All right, that's a good one. Okay, this next question, I have one more after this, but this next question, I don't know if it's, you tell me, do you think I should keep it on the show? I did it last time. It might be kind of confusing. You guys tell me if you like this question or not. But what would be the most surprising scientific discovery imaginable?
Surprising?
Yeah. See, it's a little bit weird. I don't know if it's worded weirdly.
Well, no, I mean it is weird, but that could be good. I mean, one of the like most surprising discoveries would be like I don't know that like Trump is actually like the smartest person on the planet and like secretly unified like everyone across like the world, but we just didn't realize it. That would be a pretty surprising scientific discovery.
That would be very surprising. So surprising that I don't know if that would ever happen, but yeah, surprising nonetheless. Okay.
Didn't mean to get super political, but
No, no,
yeah,
no.
that's one.
I think that I think that maybe I'll keep that question because you can answer it in so many different ways. But that was a good one. Okay, last question. Would you want to live forever? I took this from last season because someone asked me last episode if I'd still ask that question. So I like that question. So I'm gonna keep it.
Yeah, I mean, it requires sort of a not to end on like a heavy or a deep note or whatever, but like when I had to go to an office 9 to 5 every year for 20 years, or when I was in high school or in middle school, when I've been outside of my comfort zone, um, it's not that I was like suicidal, but I definitely was like comforted by the fact that things weren't going to last forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like life's hard, right?
Yeah.
Wake up, commute in, like a bunch of pressure from a bunch of people to deliver a bunch of things, drive home, get home with enough time to eat and go to bed and do it the next day, worry about, finances and all of this stuff. And then in the last 2 years, since I kind of struck out on my own and have a lot more freedom as an entrepreneur and don't have technically a boss and, can kind of be more of who I am, I've actually shifted just in the last 2 years from being like, living forever. I mean, life is hard. It would be a chore to thinking like, oh man, I kind of wasted 20 years doing a lot of stuff that I didn't want to do because I thought I had no choice.
Mm.
And I had to put in those hours, I think, to get to where I could do what I'm doing now. But I now definitely, I don't know that I want to live forever, but I feel like, oh, there's so much I want to do, and there's so little time to do it. And if you had asked me even 2, 3 years ago, I'd be like, man, this is a grind. Like, don't put forever on me. you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to see which parts in our life, like you said, we have that feeling. Looking back, I totally know what you mean. Like when you're in a lull or when you're younger and you're not sure about the future, like having that. But then when you get to that point where you feel like your life is different or has taken a turn, it's like, I want so much more of this. So it is such an interesting, weird balance. And it's always interesting to hear how people answer that question because some of it comes to like someone I'm thinking of in particular, like Carlos Martial. For him, a lot of it is to do with culture, and in his culture, death is a totally different experience than it is for me. So I think it is so interesting to hear the way that people think about it. And he also made an interesting point. He said all artists think about death. And I was like, huh. And I was like, well, I do. You do. So maybe we all do. I don't know. But it is such an interesting thing to just think about. And sometimes it can be a little taboo in some cultures, and sometimes it's not. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm the guy that gravitates towards the weird, heavy subjects. I'm not like great at small talk. And Carlos is awesome, by the way. So, Carlos is one of the few 3D artists that I collect. I mean, I have that background in Maya and 3D, so I kind of understand the underpinnings of some of it. And I think
mm-hmm.
Carlos is doing interesting stuff there. And then Lucas Aguirre is on my short list for this year. I
Oh
think
yeah, oh my
he's
gosh,
getting away from that weird, like shiny look that everyone. I mean, I understand. I wrote shaders in Maya, so I understand why everything looks kind of shiny and
right,
polished, really. But it's just neat to see someone. He's using photogrammetry, right, to capture
so
the
cool.
different points, and it's like this really painterly kind of feel and look that brings it back to like almost more traditional art history. So Yeah, shout out. I didn't give enough shout outs to artists on the episode, but both of those guys are doing really interesting stuff in 3D. And a lot of the 3D, because I came from that world a little bit, is kind of boring to me, even
Yeah.
though it's what's hot in the market right now. But those guys are doing cool work.
I totally agree with you there. I mean, I've seen Carlos's work for a while, and I love how with his rooms, even with his like collaborations, he's like, I just want to capture the person's like life and soul in this piece, which is such a cool thing to, and weird thing to say. And I haven't spoken directly to Lucas Dwyer. I follow him on Twitter, and I'm was when I saw his work the first time, I was like, whoa, this is something different. This is
Yep.
something that is so cool, and I just had to dig into it and zoom in and zoom out, and that was a really cool experience to have with his work as well. So totally on the
Yeah,
same
I've got
wavelength.
my favorite Carlos Martial piece in my collection. Like my favorite work that he created is in my collection. It's the Marcel Duchamp fountains that just drop and break and go over and over. It's a two-part series. So now I have to find a way to get like my favorite Lucas Aguirre
Yeah.
piece. There's a whole list of folks that I'm trying to go, but it's expensive, man. These
Yeah,
days,
it
it's
is.
not. Yeah, one of the things that I'm looking at that I mentioned earlier, and I know we should cut this off at some point, is whether or not I want to do an art fund, which sounds really corporate when I say it out loud, but my goal would be like some people respect my opinion in this
Yeah.
space, and I'm out of money, right? Unless I start selling more work, I can't buy multiple 5, 6, 10, 15, 20, $30,000 works, but if I can bring in money from potential collectors
That's an
that
interesting idea.
yeah, that want to, and we can do it in a way that's respectful of artists, right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking it slow, but I mean, I've had a handful of folks reach out with that as
Huh.
an idea, and it's if I can do it the right way and just get money to creatives and promote the space and feel good about it, then I think it could be something.
I love that. I definitely think there's something there, and it has to be done, like you said, in the right way and in respectful to artists and also collectors, and the money that they're putting into it. So I think that is something super interesting. I'm really intrigued, and I can't wait to hear more on that front too.
Awesome.
Um, this was awesome. Thank you guys so much for, I mean, everyone who's been watching this and active in the chat. I can never say thank you enough to you guys. It makes these live shows so nice to see everyone chatting and asking questions and just being here for all of the guests and myself. So I really, really appreciate you guys. I also appreciate all of you in other time zones that I'm sorry it's a weird time zone and you rewatch this later, but I appreciate you guys too. This was such an amazing episode. I'm so happy that I got to pick your brain a little bit and just learn more about you and your background and where you came from and what you are doing in this space and your intentions. And I'm just so excited to just see more of you and read a lot more of your work because I do. You are so well respected, and it's because you carry yourself in a certain way and you also respect other people around you. So I really appreciate you and thank you for sharing these 2 hours with me on this stream.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you too. And I think the thing that I wanted to start with and didn't, but I did mention it at one point, is that you could very easily be off making your own work right now. And it takes a sacrifice to go and lift other people and take this time to highlight other people. And sometimes you get, not all the time, but sometimes I'll get artists that are like, how come you don't write about me? Or they're like, and like, I don't think they realize there's not a lot of money to be made in like writing about artists or doing these podcasts. It's like pure passion and it takes a fair amount of selflessness, right? So I respect and am grateful that you put in the effort and do this so professionally and consistently because I know how much work it is, and the artists owe you for your efforts here. So keep it up.
Thank you. That's super kind of you. I really appreciate that. Well, thank you guys, everyone. And yeah, we had people 100% would go in on a generative art DAO, and people are just chiming at the end. Yeah, thank you. You guys rock. We'll see you on the next one. You've seen on my Twitter post. Hopefully, I have guests lined up for all Thursdays of the foreseeable future. So we have Pranksy, Tripiogi, Kitty Bast, Snowfro, which will be cool. He'll be talking about art blocks and his early CryptoPunk and our ink blotter, and like I told him, I was like, you need to pull out all this stuff. So we're gonna have a ton of cool shows coming up and many after that. So we'll see you next week on Thursday. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Josie.
All
Take
right.
care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
See you guys. Bye.